at this, after her very impassioned speech at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. This is the chairman of the committee, who is about to introduce Ray McGrath, who's the chairman of the Mines Advisory Group, part of the international campaign to ban landmines, which has received the prize alongside Jodie Williams.
Your Majesties, members of the Norwegian Nobel Committee, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow campaigners. Almost exactly 15 years ago today, somewhere close to the Thai-Cambodian border, Tun Chennaret was lying helpless in a minefield, both legs shattered by an anti-personnel landmine. As his terrified friend looked on, he attempted, in his own words, with an axe, to cut off the dead weight of my legs. Horrified by the sight, his friend carried him out of the minefield. Mercifully unconscious through lack of blood, he awoke several hours later to find that both his legs had been amputated. Today he lives with his wife and 6 children in Cambodia. He designs wheelchairs and works with disabled children to help them live a normal, full and active life. Tun Chennaret is one of tens of thousands of campaigners from more than 60 countries who work in a worldwide partnership, which is the international campaign to ban landmines. Rhett was chosen to accept this prestigious award because he exemplifies the experience, the commitment and activism which form the roots of this campaign. A coalition of more than 1,100 non-governmental organizations. We were and still are driven by a deep commitment not to ban a weapon of war, but to bring to a halt the unacceptable impact of the anti-personnel mine on people. It is the indiscriminate nature of the anti-personnel landmine, the fact that it's triggered by its victim, that it remains active indefinitely after conflicts cease, which make it different than any other weapon. However, it was also its impact over such a wide area of human activity which singled it out and made the birth of the ICBL inevitable. How could organizations committed to work with communities affected by landmines fail to recognize the fact which governments and manufacturers had chosen to ignore? That the situation was already out of control and was extending further beyond our capacity to remedy it with every new conflict. And armed with the facts about this weapon, how could civil society fail to respond? Clearing landmines while others were being planted, manufactured and traded was no solution. Amputating limbs and providing prosthesis for one survivor while another bled to death unaided was no solution. Why provide improved seeds for a farmer who must farm mined land, or vaccinate animals which must then graze in minefields? We saw a world where peace had few advantages over war. The circle of manufacture, supply and use had to be broken, and the answer was a ban. And so the campaign was born. We called for a global ban on use, production, transfer and stockpiling, and demanded adequate resources for demining and victim assistance. That call remains unchanged, a demand by civil societies that governments throughout the world could not ignore. And in Ottawa last week, 122 nations signed a treaty banning anti-personnel landmines, a treaty which overcame the slow progress which had become the hallmark of international legislation. We applaud the governments who initiated and drove this process, which began as a direct result of civil activism expressed through the work of the ICBL. The campaign, because of its diversity...
You're watching a World Today special, bringing you live coverage of the Peace Prize special, the Nobel Peace Prize, live from Oslo. We've just been hearing to Ray McGrath, the founder of the Mines Advisory Group, making a speech on behalf of the international campaign to ban landmines.
But at the same time, a key role of the campaign has been to identify and challenge areas of concern in the treaty which could cost lives and deny land. For example, the treaty excludes anti-vehicle mines fitted with anti-handling devices from definition of as an anti-personnel mine. And as Jody said, during the negotiations, the delegates at Oslo finalized the text of the treaty, but before that established the fact for the diplomatic record that landmines equipped with devices which would explode as a result of innocent or unintentional act were considered anti-personnel mines and therefore banned. Let us remember, anti-handling devices are designed to kill or maim deminers. The campaign will hold those countries accountable if this diplomatic understanding is not honored. And allow me to put this in perspective. Less than 3 weeks ago, on November the 21st at 10:30 in the morning, David Lacombe, who's an experienced humanitarian deminer, was working on the Lacombe Road in Michico province in eastern Angola. David died when an anti-tank mine exploded less than a meter from him. He did nothing wrong. He made no mistakes. He broke no rules. A magnetic influence anti-handling device in the mine responded to a signal from his mine detector and killed David. The implications of this incident go far beyond the tragic death of a deminer, because work on this key road has ceased. The resettlement of displaced Angolans is damaged by that one explosion. The community confidence in the peace process is damaged by that explosion. How can we ask these brave men and women to continue their work if their very detection devices become the instrument of their deaths? And so we view the Ottawa Treaty as a milestone in a battle to rid this world of anti-personnel landmines. While these weapons remain in the world's armories, no nation is immune from their effects. They can be delivered by aeroplane or missile, and once they're deployed, there's no magic way of removing them. It would take no more than a few days to turn this country, Norway, into one of the worst mined countries in the world. It would take years to make it safe again. And during those years, Norwegians would become so used and so familiar with the sight of limbless, scarred, and blind compatriots, they would no longer turn their heads to look. Norwegians would become deminers of their own land and learn too late, as the people of Bosnia are learning today, that there is no immunity from this weapon. To sign the treaty is not enough. 40 countries must ratify this treaty before its entry into force. And no nation who seeks to reverse the damage done to our world by this weapon can justify any delay in ratification. The international campaign will do everything in its power in coming months to achieve a legally binding ban by December 1998. To this end, we, as Nobel Peace Prize laureates, issue a challenge directly to the heads of states of each signatory country. Make sure that your country is one of the first 40 to ratify this treaty. There is no reason not to if you believe in the spirit of the treaty. What of those nations who failed to sign the treaty, or those who have not even attended the preparatory conferences? It would be very easy to focus totally on China, the United States and Russia, nations whose stubborn refusal to put humanitarian concern above ill-judged military policy is inconsistent with their positions as UN Security Council members and major regional powers. But what of those countries like South and North Korea, India, Pakistan, Israel, and Syria, whose often valid concern for their border defenses is allowed to blind them to the damaging nature of anti-personnel mines? What of Egypt, a country which is itself blighted by landmines laid decades ago, which argues it needs anti-personnel mines to deter smugglers from crossing its borders? We've heard much about the South Korean minefields. South Korea and the US government argue that the demilitarized zone minefields are so important they wish to make them exempt from any landmine ban. The ICBL does not accept the defensive utility of and the necessity for the retention of those landmines, of those minefields. Freedom is so often the justification for war. But where is the sense in fighting for freedom of a people, employing a weapon which will deny those same people, in peacetime, freedom to live without fear, freedom to farm their land, freedom merely to walk in safety from place to place? Deny them the freedom to let their children play without being blown apart by a landmine. That is no freedom. All those states who have failed to sign this treaty have failed humanity. Size, power, and economy are irrelevant. They are intransigent and they are uncaring in the face of compelling humanitarian, economic, and environmental evidence that anti-personnel mines must be banned. We are determined that the Ottawa Treaty will become a global legal instrument applicable to all states and will leave no avenues of action unexplored to reach that objective. Together we have achieved so much, but our progress must be seen and viewed against an obscene reality that there are warehouses overflowing with anti-personnel mines throughout the world. These weapons must be destroyed. Their mere presence is a threat, since while they remain in store, any country which goes to war will be tempted to deploy them. The destruction of stockpiles removes that possibility. It removes that temptation. The campaign will focus attention on those nations who have not signed the Ottawa Treaty, especially those who manufacture, export, or use anti-personnel mines. It is our contention that the treaty establishes a norm which is equally applicable to non-signatories, that the use of anti-personnel mines by any force from any nation, including guerrilla armies, is no longer acceptable. And here we would offer another challenge to signatory states: to illustrate your commitment by destroying stockpiles of anti-personnel mines and enact domestic legislation outlawing the design, manufacture, trading and use of this weapon immediately. Don't wait for the treaty to enter into force. Do it now. Arms manufacturers have driven and encouraged the trade in landmines and profited from the misery of millions. We intend to hold governments to their treaty obligations, which require them to stop all production of anti-personnel mines and their components. Who can forget the competition to ship millions of landmines to Iran and Iraq, mainly from Italy, and the role of countries like Singapore in providing a nominally legal conduit for mines to reach their destination? Happily, the Italian government has enacted legislation which has driven the worst offenders out of business, a process initiated and supported by the Italian National Campaign and the ICBL. But our business with those companies is not finished. until we are assured that they have not merely transferred their production overseas. The supply of components implies no lesser culpability than primary manufacture. We should remember the lesson learned by the people of Sweden, who believed that their country had no involvement in the export of landmines during the Iran-Iraq conflict. They were wrong, because the explosive which filled millions of Italian landmines came from Sweden. And so, sadly, we can be assured today that a Kurdish farmer, a mother searching for firewood, or a child playing in the snow will be killed or maimed by a mine like this. This is not an attempt to vilify selected nations. It is a plea for civil society to demand transparency from its government and from its arms industry. It is no model excuse to wring your hands and cry, "I didn't know," if you never asked to know. We have this target in view, that no soldier will ever again carry anti-personnel mines into battle, that no government or company anywhere in this world will make anti-personnel mines, nor any weapon by any name or shape that is by effect an anti-personnel mine. We will investigate all possibilities to achieve that target. Member organizations of the ICBL will continue examining the potential for mounting legal actions which may result in the payment of damages to mine victims, their families and mine-affected communities. Neither will we neglect the environmental impact of landmines. If a company can be held responsible for an oil spill, we must ask why similar sanctions should not apply to arms manufacturers who supply and have supplied landmines. A small girl explained patiently to me once the moments following her crippling by a mine. And these were her words. We were playing a game by the railroad track on the hillside, and we had to hop up the hill. And we each took our turn, and I was hopping, and then there was a flash, a very bright light, and I thought there was a bang, but my ears hurt, and I couldn't tell. I was frightened. My friends ran away, and I ran after them. But I fell over, and that made me even more scared. And I got up very quickly, and then I fell over again. And I slipped down the hill, and I could hear my friends shouting. And there was a strange smell, and I started crying. I wanted my mother because I couldn't get up and run away, or even sit up properly. Then I saw that something was wrong with my leg. It was twisted and very dirty, and I saw it was bleeding. Then I forget, and when I woke up, my face was wet. And my mother was holding me very close, and her tears were dropping on me. She said, "Don't worry, you'll be all right." I hurt a lot, but I was happy then. Anti-personnel mines don't just sever limbs. They can break the human spirit. We talk not of mine victims, but of survivors. But to survive such trauma requires support, it requires encouragement, and it requires love. That responsibility must not be left to the survivor's family and friends. They are often struggling themselves against poverty and the damaging effects of conflict. The responsibility belongs also to a greater family, the human family. In most mine-affected countries, we, the international community, offer little more than the surgeon's knife and prosthesis as support for those who survived the blast of a landmine. In some countries, even that basic level of care may not be available. This is not support, it's little more than first aid. This is a responsibility which the international campaign to ban landmines places high on its action agenda. We must have respect for the rights of those who fall victim to landmines, most importantly their right to control their own lives and their right to be heard. Through our member organizations, especially those who work directly with landmine survivors and their families, we will seek effective and innovative ways to ensure support for their treatment and to match the scale of the problem. That support must incorporate social and economic integration. The ICBL expects governments to join us in this attempt to redress the wrong suffered by the victim of mine explosions. There are tens of millions of mines around our world. No one knows how many, and it simply doesn't matter. What matters is that we eradicate them. There is a popular myth that mine clearance costs too much. The ICBL does not accept that that is true. And faced with the obscenity of the effects of anti-personnel mines, it would be difficult to understand what scale of measurement would be used to make such a calculation. The problem is that most funding for mine clearance is allocated from aid and development budgets, and we would agree those sources are inadequate to the task. And so we must look for other sources of funding. There should be no misunderstanding. Global eradication of landmines will cost billions of dollars. But we must afford it. We cannot talk of having concern for the global environment and yet leave future generations a world blighted with land made unusable by this deadly military garbage. We need to look for relevant funding sources. The tens of millions of dollars spent annually on mine clearance pale into insignificance compared to the hundreds of billions of dollars spent on the military. In 1995 alone, the military expenditure by the European Union was more than $166 billion. In the same year, world military expenditure was over $695 billion. Based on these figures, it would seem that the military, who are responsible for the laying of landmines, are a polluter who can afford to pay the price of clearing up the mess after them. It's not merely a matter of making funds available. It's vital they're expended in relevant, effective, and integrated manner. Mine action is a sector of development, and that this approach works is well illustrated by the program in Afghanistan. To achieve these aims, the campaign will continue to expand our activities and develop new national campaigns, particularly in countries which have not signed the treaty. We open our arms to new members who support our aims, particularly those from mine countries and from mine-producing states. Your Majesties, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are greatly honoured by the award of the Nobel Peace Prize, and are proud but humbled to share this award with previous laureates such as Nelson Mandela, Aung San Suu Kyi, Desmond Tutu, Bishop Bello, and Jose Ramos Horta, who have given so much in the service of peace. We would also like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to a fellow nominee and a fellow champion of civil action, Wei Jingsheng, and wish him well in the hope that one day he can return to his home in happier times. The International Campaign to Ban Landmines dedicates this award to all victims of landmines and their families, to those communities who struggle to exist surrounded by minefields, and to humanitarian deminers. It is the wish of every reasonable human being to leave this world a better place by having lived. It's a wish we can rarely hope to achieve. By eradicating landmines, we can leave future generations a better and safer world in which to live. It is possible. We should grasp that opportunity now. Thank you.
That is Ray McGrath from the Mines Advisory Group making his acceptance speech at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony on behalf of the international campaign to ban landmines. He said that the international campaign dedicated the award to all the victims of landmines. We also just heard him say that there's a popular myth that mine clearance costs too much. The ICBL does not accept that. Although global eradication of landmines will cost billions of dollars, the world must afford it.